Mr. Reitman, how are you?
I'm great. I'm just great because I'm here. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you as well. Thank you. I really like this film.
Thank you very much.
I'm thankful that I can be honest about that because I think it's fabulous. I think it's a
what
different movie.
What do you do when you like when you know somebody and you know that they just they did not bring their A game? They just hit like a C plus maybe.
It's a thing, yeah. You know what I do is I try to live my life with a generous spirit. So I look for the thing I like. And I hone in on that,
right.
Or I don't bring it up. Or
right.
if I am really close with that, I'll say, "Look, man, I'm proud of you that you got it made."
Oh,
you know, and then I say, "Do you want to talk about it?" And they'll be like, "I'll say, here's what I didn't think." But what I've come to realize now, and you know this, they're making so many. Just getting a film made is the win. Everything else is taste or the execution, or it happened or it didn't happen. But the making of it is the win because it's so hard to make a good film now.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like getting into the majors, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes you got a person who's like, on the third line and you're like, you don't think much of them. It's like, no. They're playing in the show.
Yeah. It's like, some guy goes like, he's a bum. Well,
I think he's pretty good.
He's in the NHL. He's in the MLB.
Yeah, exactly.
The last time we spoke in an interview, you had talked about not wanting, you couldn't imagine adapting something that was real because you didn't want to let somebody down. And here we are now, and you've made The Front Runner, which is very real and also very relevant. Did you feel a shift in your mind?
Well, I mean, and, to take that one step further, you're taking a group of people who are very passionate about this campaign. You're taking the worst week of their life. So, it's not like making a movie about, someone who, walked on the moon, to use a relevant filmic case, and go, that's probably the greatest moment of your life.
Right.
I mean, this is the worst week of the life of not only Gary and Lee Hart, but Donna Rice and his whole campaign team. And I think maybe even the journalists who were covering it at the time. I think it was a week in which the ground shifted under all of their feet, and they were all trying to figure out the right thing to do. But in a scandal, it seems like that's maybe impossible.
And so for you did the fact that there were real people and people are alive and it was the worst week, did that affect in any way or color in any way your decision to do this, your approach to this film?
Well, I just wanted to do it responsibly. I didn't really know the Gary Hart story. The first time I heard it on a Radio Lab piece, I was 10 years old when this happened, when this guy, who was the next presumed president of the United States, wound up in a dark alleyway with 3 reporters. And I just couldn't quite believe it happened, and it felt like a real-life thriller, and I bought Matt Bai's book on the subject and started to learn more. And at that point, it did become a question of, all right, how do I handle these people's stories? How can I, reach out and talk to them and make sure I'm doing the right thing here, but also make a movie? I mean, that's the thing, right? You're not just there to make a documentary. I'm there to make a movie that is, entertaining and funny and thrilling and hopefully makes you think a little bit of it, because there's all this connective tissue with 2018. And at the same time, make a movie that at the end of which I can show to these people and not be hiding in a corner.
The truth, telling the story's truth, telling the best story, being honest, all these considerations that come into a final product, because everybody says that the final result is the most important thing. But that's myopic. When there are people involved, there is more at stake.
Right.
When you played it for them, how'd you feel?
I mean, that's easily the scariest screening I've ever had in my life. I mean, I think before then, the scariest screening I ever had was my first screening of Thank You for Smoking here at Toronto, because it was the first time I'd ever showed a film anywhere, and all of a sudden I'm in the Ryerson Theater and there's 1,000 people there, and my career's on the line in that no one owns the film, Right. So that first screening you ever have is that question of, well, is someone going to buy this and people are going to see it? But that screening for Gary and Lee Hart, we went to Denver and we rented a theater, and they sat down, and I remember I told them to start the movie, the lights come down, and I was just outside shaking for the entire, hour and 40 minutes or whatever. And they finally came outside, and we went for hot chocolates, of all things. And it's funny, because I think I expected them to react emotionally. And that was really tough to go through, reliving all this. But I forget that they react the way anyone reacts after they watch a movie. Oh, good movie. It's interesting how you shot it. And, they're talking about it like a movie. Once we got into it, though, it was lovely. Gary said, "Do I really talk like that?" And his wife Lee said, "Yes,
Yes,
that's exactly how you talk."
And they really liked Hugh.
Yeah, and it's hard not to like Hugh.
Yeah. Hugh Jackman's really good in this, and we all know Hugh Jackman's a really good actor, a great actor. But we don't really get to see Hugh do this sort of thing. Truthfully, we don't get to see you do this sort of thing. We don't get to see you make this kind of movie.
Right.
I was watching it, and I chuckled at a couple of parts, but I wasn't laughing. There wasn't like a layer of charm to it.
Right.
It was just a really complicated window into a lot of things happening at the same time. Did you have confidence in your ability to do that?
Well, look, I wanted the film to be hyper real, and I wanted the film to be giving the audience at all times 2 to 3 things to be looking at on screen, 2 to 3 things to be listening to, so that they are forced as an audience to make a decision about what is important. That's kind of the whole, thesis of the film is what is important and what is relevant. This is a question that we're constantly asking ourselves right now as we watch the news. What is real news? What should we be listening to? What is important to us as we look at our leaders? We think about what is really important to us in a leader. What kind of flaws are we willing to put up with in a leader? So if we're going to ask this question cinematically to the audience by using this kind of Altman-esque style or this Michael Ritchie style where the camera floats through the frame and all sorts of stuff is coming, all sorts of information is coming at you. That information better be real. And the only way I knew I could do that is if I was writing this movie with 2 people who really knew their stuff. And my co-writers were a guy named Matt Bai, who New York Times writer, covered 5 different presidencies, and Jay Carson, who was the press secretary for Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Howard Dean. And our writing sessions were about how do we fill these rooms with real detail.
Matt wrote speeches for Audrey Hepburn.
Yeah.
And Jay is the guy that Ryan Gosling's character was based on in Ides of March. So these guys have already spent a lot of time, in the heat of stuff.
Yeah.
So you went to them and said, we want to do this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any hesitation? Did you have to convince anybody? How hard was it to get the money for this film?
Great questions. They were already interested in making a movie. When I approached them, I said, hey, let's watch this movie called The Candidate together. It's this Robert Redford film from the 70s, directed by Michael Ritchie. And we sat down and watched together, and I think they immediately got what I was after.
Right.
There's a lot of movies about politics, a variety of tone. My father made a great movie about politics called Dave. I wanted specifically to make a movie that felt hyper real, that always felt like you were dropped into the middle of a room, whether you were on the floor of a newspaper or a campaign headquarters, and you felt as though there were just as many conversations about politics happening as there were conversations about, hey, what bar are we going to? This coffee sucks. What are we having for lunch? Mm-hmm. And you're kind of weaving your way through these conversations, and The Candidate did that perfectly. As far as raising the money, movies like this are not easy to make. It is not the instinct of film studios in 2018 to make movies about complicated politics or to make movies like my last film, Tully, which is a comedy that, really looks into the heart of postpartum depression. And I was really fortunate. It was a Canadian company that financed and produced both films, a company called Braun out of Vancouver. And they've been really supportive, and the working relationship has been awesome.
And so you look at this film, and what I found really, really interesting about it was you didn't see the public in this, right? This was media, operatives, candidates, family. But this is a comment on the people, in a way, without overstating it, because it's what we determine is, as you said, relevant. Mm-hmm. But that brought down the front runner in a matter like 5 days, right? Brings down the front runner. Today, who knows what's acceptable? The line has moved so much. Yeah. And Trump could be an anomaly in that the next politician will have to be squeaky clean. Mm-hmm. This doesn't mean the yardsticks have been permanently moved. But I was watching it thinking about the people, not the progressives. When conservatives watch this or really entrenched left-wingers watch this, what will they take from this? Because maybe this is a 20, 30-year look at ramifications.
Right. And God only knows. I mean, this is the kind of thing where you need hindsight to kind of get perspective, and I think that's why we wanted to tell a movie about 1987, because it almost takes 30 years to be able to go, okay, I think we can kind of evaluate that situation now. Someone said something interesting to me, though, about today, and I think it relates to Gary Hart, and I think it relates to Trump, and it relates to a lot of what's happening now, which is the idea of shame, and that we have a system right now in which... Mm-hmm. If you experience shame, you drop out of the race.
Right.
If you're someone who does not experience shame, you tend to not only stay in, but to succeed and move upwards.
Rob Ford did it here.
Right.
Magically.
Right.
Magically. Mr. Trump has done it.
Yeah.
Magically.
So we have a system, whatever you think of the people inside it, we have a system that somehow supports the shameless.
Right.
And that doesn't seem to be an operational system.
When you look back at it now, this particular film, what do you get out of it? Or what did you learn about people, about politics, aside from the shame thing, that you didn't know at all before?
Oh, so much. I mean, I'm not a student of history, unlike yourself. I read what I read in the paper, and I spent most of my childhood watching movies. So I know a lot more about film history than I do political history. The most interesting thing I learned about American political history, and I'm not sure if this is something people know or don't know, is that in 1972, American politics shifted when the primary system was really created. Before that, we picked our candidates, or we didn't pick that. Candidates were picked by party bosses in smoky back rooms at conventions.
Right.
And there was this moment where that shifted, and this caucus system and primary system was created, and the people would pick the candidates that would run for president. And of course, once we're doing that, we need to know who all these possibilities are, who these options are, and that's in that moment that the responsibility fell on the shoulders of journalists to tell us who the hell all these possible candidates were.
Right.
And of course, once you do that, the question is, what do you need to know? What do you want to know? And that seems to be the thing that we continue to struggle with this to this day. And
a politician's personal life is always an interesting thing because you want to know if they have good judgment.
Right.
But
that'd be nice.
Yeah, right. But a lot of times, especially when it comes to sex and that sort of behavior, it's a strange moment when everybody on the center left suddenly becomes a Puritan, where suddenly they care, right?
Right.
Why does who this person chooses to have sex with, married or otherwise? It's not our business, and families are complicated, marriages are complicated, and it's one of those strange things where people go, oh, it's a sign of bad character. I don't know. Most people, like, the statistics on marriages that end are enormous. Nobody should judge them. Of course not. Any marriage that lasts a year is a fucking success, right? I think. So it's strange how we have decided that this used to matter. Now it doesn't matter.
Right.
And I wonder what matters next.
And obviously, and it's a very tricky conversation because there's so much important work is being done right now in a relationship with sex and the Me Too movement. And at the same time, I'm sure, look, this is a movie about a marriage trying to survive in the midst of a hurricane, and it's very hard to parse the difference between the personal and the private. I would think if you gauged any audience, you're gonna have one person in one seat who says what happens in a president's bedroom really doesn't matter, and the next person will say, look, they're running for president. I deserve to know everything. I want to know everything, no secrets anymore. But you're right. I remember, whatever it was, 20, 30 years ago, when we talked about politicians and their indiscretions, and liberals would say, why aren't we more like the French?
Yeah.
They seem to have it right. They don't give a shit. Why are we, why are we so sensitive? And we have perhaps become more puritanical.
Which is, I guess we just pick our battles and we decide this is the time we're going to be pissed off, and this is when
it's harder. There's a lot of battles.
I can imagine. Relative to the other films you have made, when this was complete, where was your relief scale?
Oh, it actually the least. Because the other films were more pure forms of entertainment. So at the point they were done, it was just time to kind of give them to the audience, and hopefully they enjoy them. And some of them they really did, and some of them they really didn't. But at the end of the day, they either laughed or they didn't. This film, I found that I've had to have more conversations about the meaning of the film and the choices we made during them. Politics are at such a shrill moment right now. Politics seem to fall into either an echo chamber or people just tearing each other apart, and a political film kind of enters that gauntlet.
Were you looking for something like this? You know, I love seeing it. It's a different film for you. I've loved the films you've made before, as you know. And I watched this and I thought, this is a cool film. This is a different kind of film. This is an adult kind of film. This is all of these things. Did you look at, had you done these other projects and sat back and went, I need something else now? I
mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm so curious because you're someone who interacts with artists every single day, and you're someone who's very curious about process. So I'm sure you have a better understanding that than almost anybody. But I've never looked at my career strategically like that. I think of myself as someone who's just trying to answer questions.
Right.
I have to imagine that a lot of artists, or most artists, are doing the same.
But as you get older and more experienced, the kinds of questions you want to answer are different.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think, when I made Juno, I think when I made Thank You for Smoking, I think my interests were just like, why is anyone telling me how to live?
By the way, Thank You for Smoking, it turns out, has been very, very prophetic based on the way it works today. Did you ever think that?
Yeah, I mean, it is funny, like how little we care about cigarettes now. I mean, because when I made it, we were still on the sensitivity scale on cigarettes, and now I'd be like, really? Are we worried about cigarettes? In Juno, I was worried about innocence and when we lose it, and Up in the Air was this kind of concept of, can life be lived alone? Should it be lived alone? What is the point? Like, I know we just accept the idea we're supposed to be with a partner, but what does that really mean? And I'm like anyone alive right now. I look around and I go, how the hell did we get here in 2018? And I suppose that's a lot of where this film came from.
And so what kinds of questions do you have now for what comes next?
Oh, my God. I mean, they're about different things. They're not about politics. I mean, like in general now.
Yeah.
Something I've been thinking about a lot lately is that kind of those feelings you have when you experience love for the first time, and the way that you experience things romantically for the first time, the way you start to experience them for the second time and third time and fourth time, and they become diluted. Can you ever experience things again the same time the way you did the first time? And I don't know. I don't know what that'll turn into, but that's what's been on my mind.
I sometimes wonder if, they always say that every 7 years your body is completely regenerated. Every cell is different.
Yeah.
I wonder if it does take 7 years to get that feeling again. Because
that's interesting.
Because on a cellular level, it's like, this is new.
I'm a new person.
We're working on something that's all about your first crush, because your first crush is so intoxicating when you're 12 or 13 years old.
Right.
And yeah, I'm 46 now, and I look back and go, what? Remember that?
Right.
Remember when it was completely irrational?
But then again, there's nothing so embarrassing as guys like us in our 40s having a crush.
It's the fucking worst. It's the fucking worst. No, that is true. That would be a really uncomfortable movie. Maybe they've made enough of those movies. Your sister, I mean, what a... Like her
how
too.
Extraordinary is that? Isn't that amazing?
Working Moms, like that's a really big success. That's a really cool show.
And it's cool because, my sister's a legit Canadian again and a full-on Torontonian. People, associate with me with Canada. But I grew up in Los Angeles, and I always feel like I'm kind of, have one foot in each place. And my sister is legit now, though. She's
show on CBC. That's
show
Canadian.
On CBC. It's crushing. She's shooting her third season right now. The show is really smart and funny. She somehow wrote, directed, and starred in this show while she was actually pregnant, and and then with the two kids. And I do not know how she does it.
You were telling me that when you made Juno, you played your pops the film, and he wanted you to pull out this song, but you chose to leave it in anyway, and he was right. You were right to leave that song and the performance in there.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. Well, he thought just run the credits.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And you're like, no, and you stuck to your guns to do that. And I wondered, does the family talk about story together now because you all have projects?
Oh my God, it's just like that's all we talk about. I mean, that was a really important moment for my father and I. Growing up, my dad was making movies, and
like big ones.
Yeah, huge ones, and we looked for our way to connect in the way that I think a lot of fathers and sons are trying to find that thing. And then when I could write and we could start talking about story, we just suddenly I mean, we came together and we bonded in a whole new way, and now we choose story endlessly, whether we're working on something or whether we're just tearing apart another film or another story.
Right.
And our family meals are, they're definitely governed by that.
Was it, you're talking about how it's always difficult for, certainly with parents and children. When you were looking for those moments, those connective moments with your father, were you confident? Was it difficult? Were you looking to impress him when you were 12, 13?
Yeah, but I wasn't a writer yet, and I think that was the big difference. I think if you had asked me, when I was a teenager, what do you want to do? I would have probably said music, and then but I wasn't a good musician. But I could write, but I only figured that out later. I know writers who are like, writing screeds by the time they were 10, and that's who Diablo was, but it's not who I am. And I really found that around when I was in college, and immediately segued into making films off of my father's advice. I'd been avoiding it because I was so terrified of the comparisons and the accusations of nepotism and all that crap. And my father finally gave me the confidence to do it, and then I started really going for it. And then it was kind of this immediate thing. As soon as we could talk about story, it led to conversations about our lives entirely.
Oh, that's pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's when we start talking about all the bigger stuff, and it came through that.
What did you learn about each other?
Oh, I like everything. And we've remained very open to this day. And I think when I was younger, I kind of had an admiration for people who seemed to be able to kind of share anything with their parents. It felt like their parents would understand. And I didn't have that until I was a writer, and we could talk about story, and there was this kind of like, oh, we're connected on a very cellular level, and now, like, yeah, we could talk about that, and I'm like, why can't we talk about anything?
How did you react when some of the films you put out didn't do as well as the previous ones?
No, it sucks.
Critically,
I mean, it sucks. It's heartbreaking, and it takes a long time to make a movie, and it's a lot of hard work to make a movie, and you are convincing everyone around you to sacrifice for some idea in your head. It's a lot of people. It's hundreds of people.
Do you feel like you let people down?
Oh, of course. They're like, there's people who, all kinds of crew and cast who literally leave their families behind to go shoot some stupid movie, on location with you, where they've like dropped their lives. They're living out of some who knows what in some city where they have to figure out a new restaurant and bar they're going to go to, and miss their family back home, and miss birthdays and holidays, and wake up at the crack of dawn to set some lights for some shot that you think is the most gorgeous thing ever, and
then you cut it out.
Yeah, and then you either cut it out of the movie or you bring it to a film festival and people are like, and they walk away, and you realize, oh, that was for naught. And it's one thing to be like, oh my God, I spent 2-3 years of my life on that. But it's like, no, I spent 2-3 years of a lot of people's lives on that because I thought I had something to say. And
is there any logic or wisdom to the idea that if you want to changing people is hard? Right, making art that really affects a culture is challenging. It's not like not everybody can do it. Not anybody can do it all the time. Mm-hmm. So if you want to have the kind of impact that artists ought to want to have, you need to make films or albums or write books that are the in progress, so that you are ready for you make a couple films that people like, whatever. But those lessons that you learn put you in a position to make a real heartbreaking film. Like nobody can make an epic all the time, right?
Right.
So I wonder if you have to go through these experiences to make this film, to make The Front Runner.
That's interesting. I mean, and I'm sure you've had this conversation with musicians all the time who kind of, they soaked up all their life experience up to their first album. You get a lot that comes out of there. I don't know. I mean, I think you know this a lot better than I do. I think your interaction with artists and the amount of people you talk to, and also, frankly, the way that you get people to open up. You're one of those rare human beings who gets to, people kind of share their hearts with you. And
well, I actually genuinely care about you, and I care about the art, right? Because that's the truth, and I care about how the person listening might react to it. I guess what I'm saying is I really believe that misses aren't misses. They're really not misses because nobody in life gets it right every single time. And I don't even think right works. And I don't even think failure exists. I think you're just learning something. And then Jason throws a knockout punch. I think Frontrunner is a knockout punch. I think people are going to watch this film and go, that's an adult filmmaker. That's what I really think. I mean, obviously we all like the stuff you've done before, but they're going to look at this and say, and then you can have a whole series, I think, of annoying questions of, has Jason Reitman grown up? Like, you're going to hear that shit. Is Jason Reitman a new...
I don't think so.
You never know. I guess it depends on what you make next. But I like the fact that, not everything everybody makes is a big traditional success, because I don't think you can be interesting if you win all the time.
Right. That is a great way for me to digest some of my failures. I think you're right, though. I think you're right, and dealing with failure sucks, but it does make you better.
Yeah.
And it focuses you on the way you want to spend your time and the few stories you get to tell. I mean, that is one of the weird things about making movies. I would imagine in that way it is different from writing songs.
Right.
There's only so many movies you can make in your life, even if you're, someone who can, churn out a movie every single year, which is very rare. This is my 8th movie.
Right.
And I do already think I'm ahead. It's like, okay, how many will there be total? I mean, 16, is this halfway? It's like,
16 is a lot of film.
And 16 would be a lot of movies. So what are you going to say? And then it becomes, and then when, Quentin says something like, well, I'm only making 10 movies. And you're always like, why are you putting a number on it? But then you start go, oh yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense. He's thinking about how much life he's got in him and how much he's got in the tank. And he's being very conscientious about it.
I look at hip hop and I look at the hip hop that's popular, and then I think it's a reflection of the culture. So, what is big today? The SoundCloud rappers. You go back 10 years, couldn't have comprehended it. You go back 20 years into the Busta Rhymes era, the Dre Snoop era. You see the audience. Then you go back 20 years. I wonder if it's, and the kids today. I listen to kids hip hop today ripping on Tupac, which would have been
unconscionable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These 14-year-old kids saying Tupac's boring. I'm like, well, first of all, they're wrong, but also that's their opinion, right? That's their opinion. Is it same for a movie-going audience? Is it same for, you're young, you've got this youthful energy, you're making these stories, and then at one point you're like, holy fuck, who is a 20-year-old today?
Right.
What do they want to watch today?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, if young film heads were ripping on PTA and Quentin, I'd be so pissed off.
Yeah, you're right. They don't really do that, do they?
No. I mean, there's kind of a reverence for those guys. And look, I maybe this will make me sound old, but I do look at Quentin and PTA and go, that's real rock and roll. And
100%.
And there was something rock and roll about their existence back then. I mean, the way, I sound so old right now, but I remember lining up for those movies, lining up to see Reservoir Dogs and lining up to see, whether it was, Boogie Nights or Punch Drunk Love. That experience was like rock and roll. I'm trying to think of can you think of a director right now in that age group, a young person who going to see their film is that kind of experience of?
No, I don't.
We're going to see Guns N' Roses, that's, or we're going to CBGBs, like that kind of feeling.
I don't think so. I didn't even remember what theater it was. I remember it was the Varsity in Toronto, but I don't remember what movie I was watching. And the trailer, the preview for Pulp Fiction aired, and the audience applauded big time. And I thought, I've never seen an audience cheer a trailer before. And you remember, Reservoir Dogs was only big after the fact on VHS.
Yeah, 100% right.
So it's like, what happened in the zeitgeist where this trailer now, everybody's so jacked about it because they were looking for danger. And that's what I think it is. They're looking for danger.
Perfect word. Yeah, Pulp Fiction felt dangerous. Yeah. From the opening titles with the music and God, who is dangerous these days?
Well, you are now by speaking truth in this film.
By calling, no one would ever accuse me of being that.
I think I think Juno was dangerous. I think Juno was a very important film which empowered a young girl to talk about a really important decision. And the parents in that film the adults in that film played a secondary role and let her be the lead, let her drive the conversation. The boy, Michael Cera was awkward but sweet. So I think that was a dangerous film because you let young people be in charge.
I appreciate that, but I would counter to say Diablo's dangerous.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, but that's that film.
I think that's why we love her writing. I think she writes fearlessly, and she writes into her experience openly. You know, I think there's something to it, to the fact that, you know, she started with a blog and a book and was opening her heart up. And in, you know, each time, you know, she tells me she has a new idea, there is something like an open vein about it. You know, particularly with young adult, which, I didn't expect the film to kind of have the life that did.
You know, you texted me one day when I was in LA and you said, "Hey, can you come over to a reading? You need someone to read the director's notes for young adult."
Yeah.
And I remember Patton Oswalt was there. It was pretty cool. Like Patton Oswalt, right?
Yeah.
And we sat around your table, and you and Helen and Diablo were there. Helen, producer, right? And we read the script. And as it ended, I thought, well, I fucking wonder if Jason's going to do this, because this character is nasty.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you're going to do it. And I thought that was fresh writing. That was interesting writing.
Yeah. That was a real joy to make. I hope I get to make a lot of movies with Charlize. I think Khalil Joseph, Back to Danger.
Yeah.
Khalil Joseph is a dangerous filmmaker. I think he's interesting, not by subject matter, but by style.
There's an artist, I think she's French, called Eva Hussein, who made a film called Girls of the Sun about a group of women who are fighting ISIS, combatants fighting ISIS. And I watched that and I thought, there you go.
Oh, that's cool.
There's something happening.
Or maybe,
there.
you know, Roman Gavras. Do you know his stuff?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, he's the son of Kostas Gavras, you know, director of Z. And Roman does these great music videos. He did like that MIA video where they're like out in the Middle East, like side swiping cars on the road, and he has. I think he just directed his first feature film. I'm excited to see what he does.
That's exciting. You like producing films?
No,
no,
I don't get it. I know, and I've been a producer on films, and I consider myself kind of just like, I don't know, you know, the guy you call just in case, 2 weeks in, you're like, oh, I really need your help on this. And it's like, okay, or you call this actor for me, okay, but I want to write and I want to direct. I'm just madly in love with this job, and when I'm producing, I always feel like, I don't, you know, it's like when a player becomes a coach.
Yeah.
And you could tell for that first season or two, all they want to do is just go out and play, right?
That's right,
Like they're like when they're giving coaching, they're not actually coaching. They're just like, would you just give me the ball?
And it's almost never a superstar who becomes the coach.
100% right. Because all they want to do is play. They haven't thought of it from that. It's the, you know, the person who ends up being the coach is that person who had like 2% less height or weight or talent than the superstar who had to think about the game every second of their life and now has a coach's mind. And I don't know, I love playing and producing. I have so much respect for producers who actually produce.
Do you think a director has a window? A creative window?
Oh, God. You were going to get depressing now.
No, I'm curious if you think that way, you know, because, you know, some artists, they say rock and roll, or even this business is for youth. But of course, some of my favorite films are made by cats near the end of their life. But I wonder if you ever think about iron hot needs striking.
Right. I guess I would put it into this category that there are two things happening, right? You have to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
So there's like a skill set to just, do you know how to tell a story?
Yeah.
And then there's, do you have something to say? And what you hope with any artist doing whatever they do is that these two curves meet at the same time, and that ability to actually say something and having something to say. Because you've seen both. You've seen like the artist who really has something to say, but literally just doesn't know how to do it. And then you have someone who's got extraordinary skill, and you can really respect their ability to paint, photograph, play, shoot. But you know, they don't got shit to say.
Yeah.
And that magical thing happens when their ability just turns the corner just as they have something to say. And then the question, of course, is that happens, and then you set it, and you go through the lull, and maybe you made some money, and you spent your money doing stupid shit, and do you find something to say again? And then the scarier question that comes out of that is, can you have something to say when you are happy? Or do you have to go through unhappiness to have something to say?
Which is a horrible existence to have, isn't it?
Yeah, and so that's it becomes that kind of like...
Well, can you say something when you're happy?
I don't think so.
dude, really? Yeah?
I mean, it's interesting. When I think of the cleanest year of my life, of doing a lot of yoga and eating great and really experiencing a lot of gratitude and doing all the right things you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
That's the year I made Labor Day. You know, I just think...
I like Labor Day.
That's sweet. But, like, honestly, I think for me...
Yeah.
My questions come out of being frustrated and unhappy and wanting to change things and wanting to say something. I think when I'm happy, I'm just like, yeah, man, let's just like order pizza. I don't know.
Well, maybe then as you get older, you want to be happier more. You just got to make sure you make the kinds of films that benefit from happiness. Like, you know, make your Hangover. Make your Dave, you know.
I mean, look, there's a real fairness to that, you know, what is your relationship with the audience? Is like, do you want to make them laugh and happy, or do you want to bludgeon them?
Right.
And look, I look at my father, and my father's experience has always been, I want to make the audience feel better about themselves. I think literally since he was a refugee who, you know, had to go through an escape after World War II with his parents, and he wound up on a farm where he didn't speak a language, and he was putting on puppet shows for other kids, and he couldn't communicate with them, so he's literally just trying to make them laugh.
I believe your father, as he told me, was put on all the clothes they could get out. He wore them, and they nailed them underneath floorboards of a boat.
Yeah, they were underneath the floorboards of a boat, and then they tried to get into a country as Jewish refugees, and to prove that they were Jewish, they pulled my father's pants down and showed that he was circumcised,
Jesus
and that
Christ.
was like, all right, I guess you're Jews. Howard Stern called it his freedom pass. Yeah, my father has always wanted you to be happy and to feel better about your life.
Well, we can see where it comes from. It's born out of not feeling good.
Yeah.
So he found his responsibility to make everybody feel better in light of such dire situation.
Yeah, see, I grew up, you know, in Beverly Hills, never having to worry about a second thing, never having to worry where a meal came from.
Schwarzenegger was your uncle, probably.
You know, a frustrated little rich kid with ennui. You know, it was bound to happen.
But here's what's good about this, I believe, and I mean, I'm only learning this as I get older, that no matter what your upbringing was, no matter what your privilege or access to resources was, when you reach a certain age and you're getting older, everybody's the same. It's easier when you have money, but you face the same conversation about what was my prime, the same conversation about the end is near. So the good news is discontent stays with you, regardless of your upbringing.
Oh, good. I was hoping that tank would somehow empty, but
no, I don't know.
Thank God that...
your art will be great. Your art will be great. I really appreciate you taking the time, brother. Let me just talk briefly about music, because we're going to play some songs.
Yeah.
Do you listen to music when you're writing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, great question. I do. You know, I found is on each movie that there usually is a song. There's like one song, and it's that puts me in the jive of that.
Yeah.
Of that movie, and you know, I put it on. It's like, oh, that's right, and it's almost like a tuning fork. You know, you're like, that's right, that's the tone of the movie, and you jump in.
So Frontrunner, what was that song? Do you remember?
Frontrunner was different because I was writing with two other guys. Right. I'm sorry, I wish I could have this kind of like on the other movies I can point to it, but like on Frontrunner, there was three of us, and we were kind of feeding off each other and feeding off of the candidate.
What was it on Labor Day? Do you remember? Well, you're a hip hop.
It was something
too.
Romantic. I think it was. It was this classical guitar music actually that made it into the film and annoyed people. But it was classical guitar, which I thought, I haven't really seen a film really use classical guitar in the right way.
You're a hip hop head,
yes.
Right? So if you had your Office Space moment, you're driving down the street, blasting some really offensive hip hop
God,
track.
yeah. No, 100%. I am absolutely, that Jewish guy just. Crushing hip hop in my car, and then realizing, I better turn this down. Like I understand the optics of it.
That's right. What do you like? What are you listening to?
Oh my God, this moment right now, I don't have a good answer for that. I feel like music happens the same way we've been discussing everything else. It happens in waves, and you have these moments where you're like, I don't know,
where you are,
and then you suddenly fall in love with the whole thing, and it consumes you.
Do you have go-tos? You know, you open your Apple Music or whatever you're using, and you're just Spotify, and you're like, that's the guarantee.
That'll always make me feel something. God, that's a great question. I really want to answer it well. I mean, the things that have been moving me, I mean, there's a lot of Velvet Underground. That's just always kind of like, I don't know why. There's something so human and emotional about that music. The soundtrack to Wild Wild Country, this documentary that came out last year, was extraordinary. And I don't know why I jumped to that often. The soundtrack from American Honey, which had some gnarly hip hop in it, and was
American Honey
fantastic.
is a really cool film.
Yeah,
I watched that this summer. That's a cool film.
She's an amazing filmmaker, Andrea Arnold.
There's danger in that.
Oh yeah, you know what? Thank you. We're finding the dangerous filmmakers. Yeah. If you've never seen Fish Tank, that is a movie you just need to see, and if you like that, watch Red Road and American Honey because she's a badass.
What is the role that you can play in making sure that in 10 years, 5 years from now, there are more women at the Oscars as directors? What is the role a successful American Canadian male director can play? I
mean, I've already taken a small part in that. I was on the group, the board in the Academy that admits new director members, and I was on the year that we decided, all right, no matter what we do this year, it's 50-50.
Right.
And that was complicated. I mean, that was genuinely complicated because the Academy is acknowledging people into their career, not at the beginning of the career. I mean, the real important work is about getting women jobs in television so that they are directing those first episodes of television so that they can, develop the skill set and start writing so that, when people start looking for feature directors, you have a pool of women who are all ready to, ready to go. And being at the Academy, it's tricky because you're at the end of the career, but we just said, all right, the most important thing right now is to have women in the Academy so that young girls who are even thinking about directing are going, look, this is there at the end of the road.
That's right.
So that was a year that we brought in filmmakers who had even made only one movie, like Hannah Fidel, who's an awesome director. She has a new movie coming out this fall called The Long, Dumb, Stupid Road. She had made a film called A Teacher that I'd seen at Sundance or South by Southwest, and I was like, she's amazing. She should be in the Academy. And so it was a year of bringing in a lot of young women in who will help to change the voting, bring more notice.
Dee Reese is a great young filmmaker too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great young filmmaker. So that's a very big step. I mean, you work with. I mean, most of the films I believe I've known that you've done was with Helen, right?
Yeah,
who's produced with you. And that's the other thing I think is interesting is getting more women to produce as well,
right?
And to write, get them, I guess, in all aspects of the process, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, audiences have shown they want these stories. They want women's stories. They want stories from people of color, and now there's a response to that, and it's fantastic. And I think it's about starting young. I think it's about empowering young women to tell stories. It's making sure that there's opportunities for them all along the way through high school and through college, so that they're making short films and that they are learning all the skill sets, so that when they have a story, when they are ready to say something, they really can and have the opportunity to.
I think it goes back to voters again. You look at STEM. Everybody talks about getting people into the STEM programs, right? And then, but when you're 9, 10, it's the same thing. Get them into the arts. Give people pathways, and you said empower them to like, you don't just have to be in science, technology, or math. You can be an artist as well. That's a very legitimate career choice. Yeah,
I of course agree.
Yeah.
I mean, this is such a complicated political mess because it gets back down to the fundamentals of where people want to spend money and whether what they think of as important and general appreciation of art. I mean, it's an untangleable mess.
Indeed, really nice to see you, man.
I'm glad we could end on untangleable mess.
No, that's good. What could be more important?